Hi, welcome to Pop Culture Maniacs podcast. It's been a while, as usual. It's me, Kieran, and with me is Jean. So, hello, Jean.
Hello.
And we've decided to have uh, one because of the big news of regarding Disney and Hulu and doing their great big purge. And uh, so, yes, this was shocking news for when it came out.
Yeah, it blindsided everybody.
Yes. Yeah, so for those who don't know, basically the plan is Disney Plus and Hulu are going to merge, and on the 26th of May, they are getting rid of about 60 shows and films, including film TV shows that haven't even been out for long, like Willow. Um, there's also like Why the Last Man and quite a few others, and yeah, this was quite a horror movie for many reasons.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so we were just talking before, just beforehand that with HBO they did something similar, like culling shows and culling shows and movies. Like obviously the most infamous being Batgirl not even getting a release, and now Disney supposedly one of the biggest streaming services has seen fit to get rid of content.
Yeah, it's just kind of reinforcing the thing that you and I have talked about in the past, which is, in the world of streaming entertainment, you can't really trust that your shows or your movies are always going to be there, even when they're owned by the streaming service itself.
Yeah, and I think this is particularly the case with say like Disney because these are their exclusive Disney Plus shows. It's not like they're like Netflix or Amazon, which they rotate, which is annoying. But we just have to accept it. They are getting rid of their own shows.
Yeah, and it's interesting too with Disney because they have that history back in the day of physical media when that was king of putting movies into the Disney vaults where they'd make them scarce for 5, 10 years and then relaunch them with extras or something special to get you to buy a new copy of it. And it would drive up the idea that you only have so much time to buy the copy of the thing before it went away for a number of years. And when I heard the announcement, I just couldn't help but think like, oh, so now we have this Disney streaming vault where things are going to go away, and who knows, maybe 10 years from now, Willow, the TV series, might pop back up online.
Yeah, and I just figured with the Disney Vault, it was just a way to cause deliberate scarcity and therefore deliberately push the prices up. So it was for their bottom line. It was certainly not because they were thinking, oh, these films are so special that we can only put them out for a limited time with whatever special features. It's no, you're just trying to make a lot of money out of it from scarcity.
Yeah, and this particular announcement comes at an auspicious time too, with the Writers Guild of America strike right now, and
Yeah,
one of the big issues that the writers are striking about is uh, residuals and money from streaming series, because currently the way their package works, they don't get residuals for streaming, where they get residuals from network shows. And so by cutting a show like Why the Last Man off, well, now there's no chance for the creative team behind it to ever make money off of residuals or repeated airings on streaming or having a house somewhere in the streaming world, because it's not in the contract. And if it disappears entirely from streaming, it's gone for them. And it's particularly interesting to have that happen with the strike happening and this being an issue that the writers are talking about, and with the looming Screen Actors Guild after strike also having the similar issue at hand.
yes, yes, I heard that theory. That is it really just a scare tactic from Disney that they're just trying to play hardball? And it wouldn't be the first time because Disney have not got a great reputation in Hollywood now, because as well as that you've during the writer's strike they did pretty much threaten writers, say that to break the strike, write for us or you'll be fired. And obviously, I think not many no writers fell for that, because if they did, then they would have just been blacklisted for the whole industry.
Yeah,
And
and they've had the complicated thing where like someone like Tony Gilroy, who's a showrunner and producer and writer on something like Andor, where they said, well, you can still be a showrunner and a producer, you just won't write anything. And he had to shut them down when they threatened him.
yeah, yeah, and I think this is a more the wider issue of, in like with particularly Disney, you got like things like they've gotten notorious reputation for special effects, like they and obviously there's a whole issue with special effects artists like being underpaid, like paid once, overworked. And if you say seen some of the recent Marvel films like Thor and Love and Thunder and Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania, the special effects are pretty subpar at points.
Mm-hmm.
And, uh, so yeah, there's a lot going on that front. Plus, also at the moment, because there's been reports that Disney have lost 4 million subscribers, because mainly because they lost the cricket rights in India, and cricket is pretty big in India.
Yep.
Yeah, so I mean, this is the whole streaming war issue. No one's figured out how to actually make streaming profitable yet. So, because a lot of these services run at a loss.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we also know so little about, what the metrics are, how many people are actually watching things to completion as opposed to just watching bits and pieces of things. And it's just all so veiled in secrecy that there's really no good way for anyone outside to get an idea of what the real financials are behind the scenes.
Yeah. 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 And obviously things of obviously it's bad for consumers. It's bad for people who work in the industry as well, because they obviously Disney can hide the information from act, from actors, writers, producers, or whatever. I think obviously where they did try. Obviously, another incident was with when the release of Black Widow, because they obviously had to settle with Scarlett Johansson because she threatened to sue Disney over how, because obviously say like she was only going to be paid the box office, but she was saying like, no, you released it online at the same time. I didn't say. She was trying to obviously claiming money for that part of the release as well.
Yeah, and good for her on that, because
Yeah,
she should get paid what she expected to get paid.
exactly. So, and obviously I think there's so many things wrong with it. Like if you're like writer, a writer or creator or director or even an actor, why would you even want to work on something on streaming then? At some if you've got the risk of got a risk that the show or film might just be pulled, never be seen again, and because they're not, from the way it sounds like, they haven't announced that they're going to release these shows physically, or they're going to put them on, you can buy them on Amazon or Apple or anything. So
Yeah, I was checking on some of the showrunners of or writers on Willow and Why Last Man. They're saying they don't have access to the physical media themselves. They don't have versions of it, so there's no way to get a physical copy of it.
yeah, and as I said, they're not even and they're not even releasing it on digital. So there's not even any way for consumers to get to view
Yeah,
it anyway, except
you
for,
just have a few days left before it's gone forever.
or you pirate it.
Or it lives on forever in the torrent world.
And if that is, it's like, is for anyone in Hollywood who happens to be listening, if you put things away, with audiences are just going to resort to pirating. It's not going to work. You may as well make money from it in some way.
Yeah. And the interesting thing too, with what you were saying about how, why would a creative want to work with a streamer after these last two great purges? And it's interesting to me because back in, the advent of streamers, they were seen as more desirable than going to a network because you had more creative freedom. They weren't gonna, force notes down your throat. They weren't gonna, you wouldn't have to work in a box of time or with dealing with standards and practices to make sure you were checking the right boxes for a network TV show. You had freedom to tell different stories, and that was kind of the siren song of streaming. And now we've kind of hit this point where streamers are taking away that freedom. And not only that, there's some talk about kind of reverting back to an old school network TV schedule where you have shows come out in the fall or they come out in the spring, and you have a set time that they air, and they air each week. And it's like we're reinventing cable after we've already done that, and we thought we'd thrown off the yoke of cable, and now we're back to the beginning again.
Well, yeah, just go back to my previous point, like that with streaming, no one's cracked the nut on how you actually make money. I think because obviously audiences could only pay a certain much, or willing to pay a certain much, because you put the prices up too much, people will fall away. Like Netflix, obviously, is one of the more expensive services, and they struggle every time they raise their prices.
And now they're going to take away password sharing.
So there's that. So yeah, there's I saw someone, I think I can't remember who actually wrote the who did this little thesis, said this little thesis, but they say like, with, because there's also been a rise on like the free streaming services, like like your Amazon Freeview and Pluto and Tubi, because they pretty much run on an advertisement model, and they might end up having to be more of that in the future, because then you can at least charge for the adverts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so
and then also too, though, you look at, like, we know they're not making money or they're running a loss, and we're not quite sure what the financials are on it. But you look at something like Amazon, which obviously has a huge backer, and the actual Amazon website itself is maybe financing some of the TV and movie side of things. But you look at the deals and the amount of money they're throwing at things that aren't becoming successful. The Lord of the Rings TV show is upwards of $1 billion in cost overall. That Citadel show from the Russo brothers, which was mired in problems throughout its whole thing, was $250 million. Phoebe Waller-Bridge got a $60 million first look deal and didn't actually write any TV shows as a result of it. She just got $60 million, and they just re-upped the deal again, and she still hasn't delivered on a TV show. The only show she worked on was Mr. and Mrs. Smith with Donald Glover, and she left the show. And so it's very interesting that a streaming service is throwing that kind of money at creative content and then not actually delivering on anything that appears to have caught on with the public.
Yeah. I think as well with streaming services, they're now sort of, with all of them, it's gone to filmmaking by algorithm. You see so much of the same sort of films. I mean, like again, like Netflix, like The Grey Man or Ghosted recently on Apple, that they were seen as sort of like generic fodder for that was just made based on like what was popular, like find your big name stars, find what general plots work. And that it's not, it's just how it. So I think there's even less creativity now than there used to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the unique and creative shows that come out, something like that show Mrs. Davis that was on Peacock in the States, is just weird and batshit and fun and silly, but it's something that was never going to make a ton of money. It was never going to be super popular. It was very niche, despite having bankable people behind it. And you get those cute little things, but then you also get something soulless and formulaic, like Citadel, which is just, clearly a money grab and wasn't unique at all and cost $250 million.
Yeah, and that's just insane. And you're obviously giving it away to people who are just subscribing for it. You don't even think of other ways you can like set to sell it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
I think as well with Disney, because they've particularly become way too dependent on their IP. So like seeing like obviously Disney Plus is pretty much a constant conveyor belt of Disney of a constant conveyor belt of Star Wars and Marvel, isn't it? And I
yeah.
would argue that the Marvel franchise has suffered because they're now stretched themselves too thin because it's more of a quantity over quality philosophy.
Yeah, and they've also kind of lost that driving force they had with the initial, I don't know, phases 1 through 3, maybe. Was that when Endgame was phase 3?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they had a driving story arc that built into all their movies where we're going to do this thing. And now it's just kind of we're floundering, introducing new characters. Some people are getting things. There's a loose tie with some of the stories, and I don't know. It doesn't feel the same. It doesn't feel as
Yeah,
strong.
it's not as strong. The Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is really good. I would recommend that.
I just saw it. I think it's about 20 minutes too long.
Well, but well, so I loved it.
I was kind of ambivalent, but like it's the same thing though. It's like you're telling similar stories, but there's no real point to it outside of those characters. And that's, in Star Wars now, we saw with the disappointment of the Mandalorian season 3, they're essentially trying to turn it into a mini major arc where it's going to end in a movie. And if Disney's throwing all its money at its 2 jewels of its IP crown, not counting, like a Pixar that still can do whatever it wants to do, it's gonna need other things to buoy it up, because if people get tired of Star Wars, which from anecdotal evidence that people I've talked to, they seem to be getting tired of Star Wars outside of Andor, and people get tired of the MCU, which also seems to be starting to happen. There's definitely MCU fatigue happening. They need other things. They need something else. And bringing Hulu into the fold also technically brings in FX, which brings in more adult focused TV shows, which tend to be, their awards bait shows, The Bear or something like that, where it's a really, really good show, but it's definitely not for kids.
Yeah.
Which makes things interesting and more complex, but it's also not adding anything to Disney as a brand since they technically owned it before.
Well, I was going to say, because this is more of just an American issue, because a lot of the Hulu and FX stocks was already a part of Disney because of their Star Plus or Star Originals brand. So, like, obviously, for me in the UK, we got all that stuff. We got all that stuff, all the Fox stuff. When they,
which that's interesting, because for us, like John Landgraf, who's the head of FX, who's universally beloved in the TV world because he's such a great head of programming. His big thing when they talked about maybe merging Hulu and Disney Plus in the States was he thought we need an FX thing to be separate, because FX it's not Disney. It's not branded Disney here. It's a different thing. And so I think it's going to be interesting with a merger how that happens. Will Disney kind of just keep letting FX do the interesting things it's doing and creating interesting shows and content, or are they going to try to rein them in a bit more and make them more Disney brand friendly, which would be really sad, actually.
yeah, I could see that certainly, but then on the other side, I think from consumer side, it does seem a bit pointless or even from a business side, it does seem a bit pointless to have 2 separate streaming services when you could just merge them together. Because I think that's also what Warner Brothers have realized as well. Hence why they merge in HBO Max and Discovery Plus.
Ugh, Discovery Plus.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, personally, I'd be thrilled to not have two separate streaming sites for Hulu and for Disney. That'd be great.
Yeah, because again, the whole point of streaming was convenience for audiences, and it's not convenient if you're having to go through like 5 different streaming services to find the film or show you want.
Oh yeah, like I was telling you right before we started that I'm trying to watch all the Fast and Furious movies because I've never seen them. And I have to go to I think 4 separate individual sites. And one of them is a TNT like actual TV app in order to watch all the films in the series. That's insane that Warner Brothers doesn't just have all of them on HBO Max because they own them. So it would make sense for them to have them. But no, I have to go to 4 different streaming apps to find all the movies.
Yeah, I felt the same with like something like the Friday the 13th films. They're all owned by Paramount, but not all of them are on Paramount Plus, or at least not in the UK at the moment.
That's crazy. Like you should be able to watch the thing. If the studio has an app and you subscribe to it, you should have access to their whole catalog. And it's crazy that you don't yet.
Yeah, yeah. I was going to move on to a different point now. It's just like with content, you also get some real big surprise. Like someone you would have thought something like Squid Game, a, a show from South Korea, would become such a big international hit.
Yeah. And now Netflix has a whole division dedicated to Korean drama.
Yeah, and I was going to say, if we look back, lots of things were flops, but they became popular or gained a cult audience much later in life, like Blade Runner, or Blade Runner being obviously one of the most famous examples. Shawshank Redemption, Fight Club, Fire. Yeah, can you imagine if Firefly came out now on Disney or Hulu, and it had say flopped initially, but it never got the comeback? It would
Oh
just
yeah.
it would just gone. Yeah, this scenario would have just gone in the fold. Well, Family Guy was saved by its DVD sales.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, and those movies you mentioned became popular because they, aired on TV on a Saturday afternoon all the time. And so people just started watching them and really loved them.
Yeah, and the physical sales really
Mm-hmm.
as well. It's I said you just shouldn't let these. This is the I think this is I do find it so annoying as well that like there were people like go, streaming's the future. It's cinema is dead, physical media is dead, and you think, yeah, you don't see these people speaking up now, do you?
Right. And, the whole idea of, shows finding a life later on or after they've been released. And, you look at something like Why the Last Man, which here aired on FX and then appeared on FX on Hulu afterwards. And, it got generally positive reviews. And unfortunately, it was canceled before they even finished airing their first season. They didn't even finish airing it on FX. And it's a good show. It's a solid show. But I think it's also hurt by the fact that there's never going to be a second season because it got canceled. And then something like Willow, which was a muted release and Disney did not put much money behind it to promote it. And it got generally favorable reviews. And there was still talk that it might get another season. And now I guess it's officially been canceled. And it's going to disappear because, they didn't put the money behind it that they could have, and that's really disappointing. Is you have the IP, particularly something with Willow, which is Disney has the IP from the film, and you just don't promote it. You don't try, and you put all the money into making it, and you don't try.
Yeah, yeah, you do bring up a good point because as well, also depends on like you are very, especially if you're thinking you're more casual viewer, you're very dependent on what the streaming service recommends to you. So always that will be up top, will be like that really big, would be their big sellers. So obviously Disney case Star Wars and Marvel, and then you would have to really search for something. Um, if you more more, well, I wouldn't say obscure, but something they don't put much effort in the promotion side.
Yeah, like, and the way the app is set up here, I'm not sure if it's the same for you guys, is you have the boxes at the top when
Yeah,
you
yeah.
immediately sign it. Yeah, and it's like Star Wars, Marvel, Pixar, like I guess Disney Animation or something. Like it's the big ones. And then you have to search if you want to find something else. And something like American Born Chinese, which is coming out soon, I suspect will be right at the top there because it's, something they're pushing really heavily. You've got Michelle Yeoh, you've got Ki Hwan Kun, you've got like, Oscar winning actors and people who are really hot right now. So they're going to push that. But something like Willow, I would have been somebody who they should have pushed that to. I would have enjoyed watching it when it came out. And I wouldn't have known about it had I not been a critic who already knew about it.
I think I was going to raise up this point as well. With Disney Plus, I think it has actually been detrimental for a lot of releases for film cinema releases for Disney, because like films like Lightyear and Strange World, regardless of what you think of quality, because Lightyear wasn't very good, but it's like it does seem to be the case. Like, why wait? Why go to the cinema and watch it? Why, if you could just wait a few weeks for it to come out at on Disney Plus. Plus, you get loads of things like I noticed, like when like scrolling through like things like their Fox films like Amsterdam and see how they run. Like, oh God, that came out quick on streaming services. It does seem, sort of like it does seem to be like shooting themselves in the foot in a way.
Yeah, I mean, I know I've made decisions on whether or not to go see a show or a movie in theaters where I'm like, well, I can wait a month for it to be on, Paramount Plus. That's fine. I can do that. I don't really have the time right now to go see it. And like I went and had dinner with my parents last night, and the first thing my dad said to me was, "Oh, Ant-Man and Wasp: Quantumania is now on Disney Plus." So I started watching it because I didn't go see it in the theaters. I'm like, well, okay, well there you go. He didn't want to go see it in the theaters because he'd heard it was and then he's like, I can wait 2 months to go watch it on Disney Plus. That's fine. And so now we've created this idea where maybe I don't need to go see it now. I can just wait for it to be on streaming. And so it's gonna hurt theatrical releases, like you said.
Yeah, it's entertainment cannibalism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. So is what do you think about sort of your more general audience though? Because obviously, like when you go on like the Twitter sphere or Facebook or whatever, you hear obviously a lot of people complain, like why are they doing this? What a stupid move. Obviously, these are like people who obviously follow the news quite regularly. What about you say people who aren't so um, adverse or just not that interested? Because obviously, your general audience just wants to be entertained.
Yeah, I suspect for most people, if they hadn't heard of the shows and the films for going away, they may not even hear that they're disappearing. Um, it's one of those things like the tree falls in the forest and no one hears, doesn't make a sound. If you're not tuned in to the entertainment industry, if you're not aware about these things, nobody's really gonna talk about it. I don't think it's necessarily gonna make a bunch of people who've never watched these shows or these films suddenly sit down and watch them all over the next few days. I think with HBO and their Purge, the fact that Batgirl was going to be a DC EU film really kind of got that up into the zeitgeist, and people who weren't even familiar with what was going on knew what was happening because there was so much shock over the fact that a potential theatrical release was completely scrapped after millions of dollars were spent on it. But here it's, smaller shows. It's not like they're getting rid of Iron Man or something that would be a big deal to a lot of people. So I'm not even sure a lot of people are going to realize what's happening.
Yeah, yeah. I certainly see your point on that one. It does feel like from a critic standpoint, it's like you feel like why even bother putting the effort in like reviewing it and giving you a bit of free promotion, even if it was good, if you're going to say pull it, if you're going to pull it in 6 months or a year though, it just feels like wasted effort. on our.
Yeah, I mean, we put in hours of watching their content and then writing up their content. And then, yeah, if 6 months to a year later, suddenly it's like, yeah, so that show that you gave a really good review on, or it's gone now. Well, great. Great. I'm glad I spent, 15 hours of my life
Yeah.
on that.
Don't even give us the option to view it in any other way.
Yeah, I mean, technically, I still get some stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There's one thing, but again, as I said, it's a. I think it's a consumer. It's a bad move for the consumer as well. We don't even get the option.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the real sad thing is, you know, if you hear about, somebody hears about, oh yeah, I just found the movie Willow. I watched the movie Willow for the first time. And then someone says, oh yeah, there was a TV series about that too. And they go, oh, I love that. I love the movie. I want to watch a TV series. Well, you can't. Disney took it away. It's gone now.
Yeah,
And that kind of thing, where so you could start people, down the path. I mean, think of something like Star Wars, where generations of people have watched it now, the original movies, and become fans of this universe and this world, and they know they can always go back to those original movies but also watch all the new stuff that's been built out. And if you have an IP that you really want to build, shelving elements of it's not going to help.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, it's all a bit like with sounds a bit like with when Disney brought Star Wars. They pretty much went, yeah, all the expanded universe, yeah, all that's gone. Not doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah, it's all gone, except we're going to start bringing it back slowly because Dave Filoni likes some of it. So we're going to start bringing bits back.
I mean, I just find it sickening. I just really, hence why I wanted to do, um, to speak about it and write up about it right now whilst it's still fresh.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. I can't even fathom what these creatives are going through, like losing something that they put their blood, sweat, and tears into and assumed would always be there. And now it's gone and you can't even get a copy of it, which is just it's just despicable that they could do that and have no recourse.
And it's probably Christopher Nolan was right when he complained to when he left Warner Brothers and pretty much what made his demands like he had to have like a 90-day cinema window and everything. And if you've got a big enough reputation, you can demand a physical that it gets a physical release and everything.
Yeah, I'm intrigued to see what these strikes bring about because the writers, the actors, the director's contract ends soon too. So you could have almost all of Hollywood on strike, and this could really be seismic change to how streaming is dealt with. And I
Yeah,
think following that would be particularly interesting.
yeah, and it's really good because the last major writing strike was it 2007, wasn't it?
2010.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
to the famous Breaking Bad thing where Jesse did not get killed off in the first season because of the writer strike.
all right, okay. Because I remember like the 2007 one being massive because it had a massive impact. Because I remember
Mm-hmm.
like Heroes or pretty much the second season was
Yeah.
gutted, and you had like Transformers, Revenge of the Fall, and then Quantum of Solace were made without even having completed scripts because obviously the writers couldn't couldn't write anything, get anything before the camera started rolling, and couldn't write whilst the cameras were rolling.
Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no, this seems like a good time to sing "It's a Pirate's Life."
Not that we would ever endorse pirating. However,
Yeah. No, like,
you have a few more days left to watch those things, and
yeah.
then
But then a lot of these pirating sites can now pitch themselves as like sticking it to the man instead of dodgy criminals.
yeah, I mean, hey, you want your Willow, that might be where you have to go.
Yeah. I think this is a so yeah. Anyway, I'd like to thank our listeners very much today. Obviously, I think Jean and I have had we think we had an in-depth conversation. Hopefully you agree with us. As always, like us, subscribe. Obviously, check out popculturemaniacs.com. We write lots of great stuff in our humble opinions. Thank you very much.